Hi guys, welcome to another session. So today we are going to summarize one of the most important Marxian theories, that is historical materialism. So there's a first major theory under Karl Marx, and that serves as the foundation for all his later work that you have seen already, alienation and class struggle. So if you understand this theory, historical materialism, deeply, every other Marxian concept will automatically connect. So see, when it comes to Marxian theory of historical materialism, let me tell you this first. Marx never used the term historical materialism himself. He called it as a materialistic conception of history and first elaborated in his work, A Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy. So you need to write the name of the book also. So let's break down the term. When you talk about historical, why it is called historical? Because society evolves through history stage by stage. That's exactly what he is discussing in this theory. And what is materialism? Because the material conditions of production, like how goods are produced and how, who controls them, who have ownership to them, all that determine everything else, like politics, culture, religion, and even human consciousness. That we discussed when we discussed this idea about society. Right, I told you about economic infrastructure, superstructure. Economic infrastructure shapes the superstructure, which in turn will help in the functioning of economic infrastructure. So I hope you understood what exactly you mean by historical materialism, right? So in short, I can tell you Marx explained both society and social change through material condition and not through ideas or values. He give importance to production, he give importance to material condition, he explains social change in terms of material condition, he explains society in terms of material condition or production process or production. So when you talk about historical materialism, this theory has to be discussed in two parts. First, his idea about society, which we already discussed, forces of production, relations of production, production process, economic infrastructure, superstructure, being, social being, all that we have covered. Now we need to talk about the evolutionary model. That's the second part. Okay, so here I'll be discussing the second part, but we are covering it as a theory. But before that, let me talk about a concept of dialectical materialism, which in detail I'll discuss separately. So to explain the social change or the changes, Marx borrowed from Hegel's dialectics. So here the idea is that, the idea that contradictions lead to progress. See, every society have contradictions. So this society contradictions, because of that, there will be some progress. So contradictions, then some ideas will come to solve this. So progress and new society. So ideas will lead to changes. But Marx reversed this idea of, Hegel's dialectical idealism, right? He reversed it and he said it's not the ideas, it's the material condition. So for Hegel, ideas change the world. That's what dialectical idealism. There are dialectics present or the contradictions present. When the contradictions is there, ideas will come. So that lead to social change. But for Marx, it is not the ideas, it is a material condition. That material condition will create new ideas because ideas are part of superstructure, and the superstructure changes are related to economic infrastructure, which is nothing but the production process or the material condition. So when the material condition change, the ideas change. So you need to give importance to material condition, because for Marx, material conditions changes the ideas. Economic infrastructure shapes the superstructure. Ideas are part of superstructure. So that's what dialectical materialism. For Hegel, dialectical idealism. For Marx, dialectical materialism. So according to Marx, it's not that new ideas that transform society. It's the economic infrastructure, it's the base, it's the core, and the productive relations that generate those ideas. So ultimately, the material condition generate the ideas, then create social change. For example, you see the rise of capitalism. That did not begin because people thought of capitalism, right? It's not just emerged out of someone's mind or someone's idea, the capitalism. It began when industrial production, when machines and wage labor emerged. So these material changes that happened over a period of time, that created the new social and political ideas, and then capitalism. Hope you got it. Now, there are two parts in this theory, as I already discussed. So the conception of society, that's the first part, which we already discussed in Marx's idea about society, where we discussed about forces of production, relations of production, living, all those we discussed, the economic infrastructure, the superstructure, the being, social being, and then evolutionary model of social change. Here is where you will be seeing how society evolves through different stages of production. So now what we are going to do, we are going to discuss the evolutionary model. the evolutionary process of change, since we discussed the first part already. So here is where you'll be seeing the stages of social development. So Marx visualized human history as an evolutionary movement through 6 stages. Now remember, when we discussed in the beginning itself, Darwin's theory of biological evolution acted as an initial perspective for sociology. So in Durkheim also we'll be seeing the way he adopted this approach. So Marx also, used evolutionary perspective. You can say this is the evolution of society. So he understands society in terms of 6 stages. 4 belong to existing societies and 2 are futuristic societies. So existing societies are primitive communism, ancient mode of production, feudal mode of production, capitalist mode of production, and futuristic societies are socialistic mode of production, and then the communism finally. Okay, so when we talk about primitive communism, there is no class, no private property. Ancient mode of production, 2 classes, masters and slaves. Masters are the haves and slaves are the have-nots. Feudal mode of production, lords and serfs. Capitalist mode of production, capitalist and worker. Socialist mode of production, it's the rule of workers. Communism, it's a classless, stateless society, just like primitive society. Primitive communism, it's no class, no private property. Here also communism, but advanced from primitive. Here all the developments have happened, but classless, stateless society. So let's start with the first stage, that's the primitive communism. I'll go faster, okay? So that's the earliest stage of the human history. So the population was low, nature provided abundant food, no issues. People used simple tools and no concept of private property and were socially equal. And the production, if you see, was collective and small scale production. So no classes, no exploitation, complete equality. They want everything, everything is available easily. Then population increased, right, over a period of time. So what happened? Demand for food increases. Now, earlier things you used to get easily. When the population was increasing, some kind of competition was also there. So some people developed some better tools and they started controlling the production or production of food, or they started storing more food, right? And that created a kind of master-slave relation. So those who have abundance of food, others are dependent upon them, right? So masters own the tools and the surplus food and everything. So slaves depended upon them. So here you can say there is an inequality and a kind of exploitation started beginning for the first time in history, and society now divided into 2 classes, owners and non-owners, simply masters and slaves, owners of their tools and others who are dependent on the masters for food and protection, food. Okay, now comes the next stage. So again, over a period of time, new forces of production, that is settled agriculture, evolved. So the exploitation of slaves reached at its peak during this time. They are asked to, produce more and more food, and slaves revolted. Remember, you need to write like this: when the mature condition exists, slaves revolted. Mature condition means peak of exploitation, and then alternative is also available. If alternative is not available, they can't go. So exploitation at its peak, at the same time, alternative mode of production is available. That's what I mean by mature condition exists. So slaves revolted and new society emerged. That's the feudalist mode of production. So here, the land became the key productive resource. So lords are the landowners who control the land. Serfs cultivated in their land. In return, the serfs are the ones who's undertaking cultivation. So what they will do is they'll pay part of the produce, because they can cultivate, they get the produce, but where they store it, they need some kind of protection. So for the land they need, and protection also they need, so they will pay a part of the produce, because landowners, you need to have the land. The serfs will produce, yes, they know the cultivation and everything, but you need land, you need to store things. So for this, still they are dependent upon the landlords, and they need to pay part of produce. Over a period of time, the lords demanded more and more produce as a rent. So exploitation again increases. Now the productive forces like factories, machines, industrial setup begin to appear. So when the exploitation reaches at its peak, which means mature condition exists, exploitation, at the same time this industrial setup is emerging, alternative is also available, mature condition exists, serf revolt, and that marked a kind of transition to capitalism. Now, here, the capitalism is based on wage labor and private ownership of industries. So, capitalists, they are the owners of factories, the worker, they sell the labor for wages. So, you think that you are free. The workers thinking that they are free, they can go and work whenever they want and they get wage. But they depend entirely on capitalists for their survival. So they face exploitation in terms of low wages, long working hours, and poor working conditions. So such kind of exploitation was so high, and the contradiction between the capitalist and workers that create class struggle. So I told you already there is an antagonist cooperation between them, right? The interests are contradictory. So when the mature condition exists again, which means maximum exploitation, the workers revolt and they capture the means of production, and that lead to socialism. So when it comes to socialism, this is a transitional phase. Eventually, it should end in communism. So here, workers now own and control production collectively. So here, the private property is abolished. So the distribution happens based on needs. And this is a transitional stage that happening between capitalism and communism, a temporary transitional phase. So the slogan here becomes, you see, from each according to his ability to each according to his work, something like that. And then comes communism. That's the final, and that's the dream of Marx, the ideal stage for human evolution. So all classes disappear. There is no private property, there is no state, there is no exploitation. The society is classless, stateless, and egalitarian. Everyone is equal. So everyone contribute according to their ability and they receive according to their need. So you contribute whatever you can. So some healthy people will contribute based on his capacity. Brilliant people will contribute based on his capacity. For example, a disabled person will contribute based on his capacity, but everyone get based on their needs. There is a famous Marxian quote also which you can write. Communism deprives no man of the power to appropriate the products of society. All it does is it deprives him of the power to subjugate the labor of others in terms of such appropriation. So if you can get opportunity, you can write this also. So what we discussed is, if I need to summarize the dynamics of change through continuous struggles that we have seen, struggle between forces of production and relation of production is what we have seen first. Struggle between two opposing classes. In ancient, it is masters and slaves. In feudal, it's lords and serfs. In capitalism, it's capitalist and worker. That ends in communism. So struggle between force of production and relation of production, end in communism. Struggle between man and nature, end in communism. Struggle between being and social being, end in communism. So all these struggle that will continue until all the contradictions are resolved, and the contradictions will be resolved completely in communism, and all these struggles will finally end in communism. So I repeat, there are 6 stages, 4 existing stage, 2 futuristic stage. In that two, one is transitional phase. So primitive communism, no class, there is equality. Ancient mode, master-slave relation, inequality begins. Feudal mode, lords and serfs, agrarian exploitation is at the peak. Capitalist mode, that the capitalist and worker relation, that's the industrial exploitation. Socialist mode, workers control everything, that's the transitional phase. Communism, there is no class, perfect equality. So couple of Marxian quotes I have given in the PDF, which you can write. Man makes their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They make it under circumstances directly found, given, and transmitted from the past. So that perfectly captures Marxian view that the individuals act, but always within material and historical constraints, right? So in short, again, historical materialism explains how society evolves through different stages. There's a classical exhibition of evolutionary perspective applied in sociology, and the driving force is the production process and the class struggle. Class struggle as a separate theory I'll discuss in the next session. It's not morality, it's not ideas, it's nothing else. It's the material condition, it's the production process, right? So the final goal is what? Communism, which is a classless, stateless society, which is an egalitarian society. So that's about this session, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you got some idea. I hope I have summarized in as easy as possible. So in case if you're looking for any sociology mentorship classes or the test series, you can get in touch with us. Our team will help you. See you guys.